Welcome to another Live with Kevin. So glad that you're here. I would say good morning, but it's not good morning for everyone. And it's not even good morning for my guest. I'll get to her in a second. If you're here with us live, I'm so glad you're here. I'm also glad if you're watching later, of course. But if you're with us live, I have a couple of special thoughts and invitations for you. And that is to engage with us. And the easiest way to do that is to use the comment section in whatever social platform that you're joining us on. And the first thing I'd like you to do is just to say hello. Tell us where you're from. So if you're watching live, just put a note in the comments and tell us where you're located. We'd love to know that. And then as this conversation unfolds, I'd like you to imagine that you're joining my guest and I around a table. Now, my guest and I are not at the same table, and I know you're not at the table with us either, but I want you to imagine it. And if we all were around the same table, if you had a question, you'd ask it, you had a comment, you'd share it. If you had an idea, you would offer it. That's what you would do naturally. And that's what I'd like you to do here, because if you do those things, it will guide me. It will lead to a better conversation. I may ask your specific questions, which may lead to making this even more valuable for you. So I hope that you will engage with us if you're with us live. And if you're watching later, I hope you will engage in your mind with the ideas that we're sharing. And given all that, it's time to move on to do the intro for what will become the episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And that starts, Marissa, for you in 3, 2, 1. You've read about, talked about, maybe even been to workshops about emotional intelligence. And if you're like many I've talked to, you agree with it and perhaps wish you had more of it. This conversation will give you hope and guidance. And more than that, it will give you real life places where emotional intelligence can be a real advantage for you. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally to make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could join us in the future live on any number of social media platforms. You can find out when those live streams are happening and how you can get involved by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to, which are just two of the platforms in which these take place. You can just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. So remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or /LinkedIn for all of that inside scoop. If you like what you're hearing today and want help in developing the leaders in your organization, let's talk. Reach out to us at info@kevinikenberry.com, and we'll schedule time to learn more about your needs and share how we might be able to help. And with that, let me bring in my guest, who comes to us, for me, from halfway around the world. And her picture is not showing up. I'm going to remove you and bring, oh, there it was. It just was slow. There it is. Welcome, Amy Jacobson. Let me introduce Amy for you all, and then we'll get started. Amy is an emotional intelligence and human behavior specialist, delivering emotional intelligence programs, keynotes, and workshops across Australia and internationally. She is a twice published author of books, Emotional Intelligence, a simple and actionable guide to increase performance, engagement, and ownership, and her latest book, The Emotional Intelligence Advantage, Mastering Change and Difficult Conversations. And so, as I promised in the open, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, and we've got the perfect person to do that with. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hello, Kevin. It must have been all of that distance between us. It just took a little bit longer for me to pop up then. But thank you so much for having me.
When we did it before, there wasn't any, so then I got concerned because, technology. So let's see. We've got Chicago and Fort Worth and, good morning, Caitlin, and Oregon, where it's quite early. Good morning this morning. We've got Michigan, the we got all kinds of people here with us. New Jersey. Listen, we're so glad that all of you are here. And I really want to start, Amy, because I think that words are important. And because words are important, and because we're talking about a topic that everybody talks about, as I said before, but I'm not sure everyone really gets. And because you wrote the book, I'd really like your definition of what you mean by emotional intelligence. So we have a common framework and foundation to start the conversation.
Beautiful. So I like to define emotional intelligence against IQ, right? Because most of us know what IQ is, and that's a very common conversation. So to me, your IQ is what you know and what you can do, where your EQ or your emotional intelligence is the how and why you do it. So these two areas come together to pretty much make up every decision and every action that we make in life. And that how and why we do it is where the emotional intelligence is going to come in. How well we deliver it, how we interact with other people, how much we understand our why and what is driving us, what makes us tick, what makes other people tick. So it's really that deeper emotional understanding of who we are and who the people around us are.
Hey, everybody, this is why I've been looking forward to this conversation, because having read the book, I can tell you that you're going to get common sense, very clear ideas today. I absolutely love that. So, lots of people have written books about this topic. And you even wrote an earlier book about this topic. What's the big idea of this book? And we're not, and by the way, everybody, there's no way we can talk about everything in this book, nor do I want to try. And yet it's important, I think, for us to have a context, Amy, of what you think the big idea of the book is.
Yeah, beautiful. So as you mentioned, Kevin, this is my second book. The first book that I published through Wiley is The Fundamental Basics of Emotional Intelligence. So the whole purpose for the first book was that there was already so many books out there in the market on emotional intelligence, but they were very sciencey. And I would regularly get messages, especially from people around the world, saying, can you recommend a book on emotional intelligence? So I would recommend the common ones, like Daniel Goleman, Travis Bradbury, all of your common ones, right? And everyone would say, I've read that one, but I just want one that's simple, one that actually converts it into a language that we can understand, one that I can implement straight away into my workplace. So my first book is exactly that. And that is why it's actually called, it has the word simple in the subheading of it. And it is just the fundamental basics of emotional intelligence. It is an easy read. It is not academic. I've done all the research for you. I've just letting you know in simple language. And it's also a lot of 1%ers that can just go straight into play. So the kind of book that you can use, a lot of the feedback came through. It wasn't just for the workplace. A lot of people took a lot from their personal life out of it as well, which was fantastic. The reason why I wrote this book is because once people had read that first book, they wanted to dive deeper. And this book here is taking emotional intelligence deeper, but still keeping it simple. So the whole purpose of this book is to highlight two of the biggest areas that leaders, but also human beings in general, avoid. And that is change. And when I say avoid change, we can't too much avoid it, but we don't do it well. We really don't do it well. And the second thing
this is shocking news. And by the way, that's not just in Australia where that's true. Just saying.
No. Look, there is, and I think that there's a reason why we don't do change well, and I'm sure we'll get into it in this conversation. And it comes down to the natural wiring of our mind. So it's no surprise that we don't do change well, because if we go with the flow of our wiring, we are going to be pushing that change and hoping that people love it. But we'll get into that. But that's the purpose of this book, is to be a lot more focused on the workplace. So it does have a really strong workplace focus on it. And it's also for people more in leadership roles. Now, when I say leadership roles, I don't mean by job title, I mean by skill set. So anybody that's in a leader type role will be able to utilize this book. And again, it has very simple actions, things that you can read and implement immediately in your workplace without having to work out how it aligns.
Leadership is a verb, not a noun, everybody. So there's so much that we could talk about here, but there's a couple more things I want to do, because Daniel Goleman's book was what, 20 years old ish?
His first one. Yeah,
The
yeah.
first one. When we first started to be, I mean, when we first started, that's where most people would trace their first recollection or understanding of the idea or of the phrase emotional intelligence
Yeah.
or emotional quotient. And so it's been around, it's not new. And yet you would say that this is, if it's possible, more important now than ever. Why?
Yes.
Why?
One of the biggest things I think that is bringing it to its highest priority at the moment is that we've finally got to a place in workplaces, but in life in general, where people are being encouraged to speak up, to have a voice, to say your opinion, to be heard, which I think is incredible. It is incredible, and this is a place that we should have been at a long time ago. But the fact that we are there now and we're encouraging more people to speak and more people to talk about their feelings and to talk about their opinions, what we're finding is that all of a sudden there is a lot of noise. There is a lot of different voices at the table, and a lot of those voices are different opinions. And as human beings, we are wired in a way that we want to be right because we believe our values and beliefs that are embedded in our mind, we believe they're right. So when we come across people who have different values, different beliefs, different opinions, different feelings, different thoughts, it's a real struggle for our mind because we're like, well, hang on a second. How can you be right when I've got a different opinion? Does that make me wrong? Oh, no, no, no. I'm definitely not wrong.
Oh,
So
and I might be the boss. So by definition.
right, right. So this is where I think it is so important now, and we're really seeing this peak in emotional intelligence because we are creating a more interactive, open, and honest environment for human interaction. And in order to do that effectively, people have got to build their emotional intelligence skills to be able to know what to do when someone disagrees with you or when somebody has a different opinion.
Yeah. One of the things, I'm sure you've heard it. I've certainly heard it. Well, and it's a bit, perhaps could be seen as a bit cynical, but it's a real thought that people have. Well, okay, like that all is nice,
Yeah.
but like, is that really always an advantage? You're calling this book the Emotional Intelligence Advantage. Isn't there a downside to emotional intelligence too?
Only if it is done incorrectly. And what I mean by that, and I think this is part of the misconception, right? That there is a misconception around emotional intelligence that it is all about rainbows and lollipops. It is about agreeing with people. It's about being happy every second of the day. It is not about that. Sure, there are elements of that, but to be emotionally intelligent, for one, you've got to understand that there will be good times and there will be bad times. There will be good days, there will be bad days. And to be honest, nobody loves fake positivity. So you have got to feel the real feels, right? So there are going to be moments where anger is the right emotion or is the appropriate emotion for that situation. And the other thing is with emotional intelligence is that being there to encourage other people's feelings and understand how they are processing it is absolutely the first couple of steps of emotional intelligence. But once you realize, and the reason why we do that, if I take a step back, the reason why we do that is because we are encouraging them to be emotionally intelligent in response. But to be emotionally intelligent, you've got to work out in some situations that the other person is not going to leverage their emotional intelligence. Therefore, for you to be emotionally intelligent, you've got to flick over from asking questions to telling. So it's that very fine balance, I like to say, between being liked and being respected. Sure, you're always going to go in with the right questions and the encouragement and hope that that person will stand up and own it. Hope that that person will accept the role that they play and the ownership and take control of it. But in those situations where they don't, it is your responsibility to flick over and do what it's going to take to be able to progress this forward. So you cannot get caught in that loop of and become a walkover. So therefore, I can see the concern about there being downsides to emotional intelligence. Absolutely is. But I think the more that we look at that, I would say that's not being emotionally intelligent. That's being in touch with emotions. That's being in touch with your emotions and in touch with the people around your emotions, but that is not regulating and that is not helping people to move through their emotions.
You were just talking in this short description here about one of the big parts of the book, which is about using emotional intelligence to help with difficult conversations. And one of our listeners, Renita, said, when you start with shared values, alignment follows and disagreements rarely become an issue. And I love that, because she's not saying we won't have disagreements, but there's a difference between whether we have disagreements and whether they become a problem. Right? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first, I love what Renata's saying there around the shared values and alignment. And I talk quite a bit about this in the book around you cannot have a high performing team unless you have that alignment and you have those shared values. But at the same time, you can't force values upon people. And you can have very similar values, but there will always be parts of them that are slightly tweaked or slightly different. And what Renata is saying there is exactly that whole topic of emotional intelligence, because even when you don't have shared values, or as long as you still have the alignment there, you have the ability to be able to be emotionally intelligent and know that we're looking for an outcome. We're not always looking for a right or wrong. We're not always looking for a winner or a loser. So when you go into these disagreements, if you've got that alignment right, you are able to step out of that ego-driven part of our mind and actually look and say, okay, this is the outcome that we're looking for here. And sometimes to get the outcome, we've got to put our pride aside. We've got to put our pride aside and not worry about doing I told you so, or I'm right and you're wrong, or I just said that, you're just putting in different words. You've got to get to that point where you're like, okay, the outcome I'm looking for is this. And if
that
the emotion,
matter. Those things don't matter. What matters is where we get to.
Exactly right. And it's understanding the emotion that the other person is feeling, because if, say, for instance, if you have somebody who's quite angry in front of you, we know the worst thing you can say to an angry person is calm down. So if you're in that situation, and as Renata says, if you've got that alignment with that person, even if you disagree with the emotion that they are displaying, when it comes to emotional intelligence and empathy, you don't get to judge whether their emotion is right or wrong. What you're doing is recognizing the emotion that they're feeling and knowing what is it going to take for us to move through this without it being an issue, without it being disagreement, and getting the right outcome for everyone.
So everybody, I need to be fully transparent with you all. So a little bit about the process, right? So we select books to be and people to be on the show. And then I look through the book to determine how I'm going to describe it to do a live stream, which eventually, of course, if you're listening to this later, is now a podcast. And all that's done usually is done before I've read the book, or before I've done more than just peruse the book, right? So I titled this, the title of the book, The Emotional Intelligence Advantage. And I was planning to, even this morning, to focus on some of the basics. Even in my description, I was going to focus on some of the basics, even though I really wanted to go beyond that. I'm just owning that right now. I'm going to choose to move to a little different focus for the rest of this conversation than I might have originally. I said at the start, there's way more in this book than we could talk about here anyway. So I'm shifting gears. I'm just telling you all that I'm doing that. I'm owning this at this moment. And that's part of Amy's language. So I said that partly for her benefit. But I really do want to focus on using emotional intelligence in the change effort, in the change situation, in the change context. If you will. And you open that section talking about, so first of all, let me say that I've been saying for years that there's always an emotional component to change. Mm-hmm. Always an emotional component to change. And if we don't acknowledge that, recognize that, lean into that, we can't be successful. So that puts us very much on the same wavelength. One of the things that you said early in that section of the book was you And it's a metaphor that I think is brilliant. So I'd like you to share it, because if others get as much value out of that metaphor, like that would be enough to make all of us get value here, right? So you said that we often treat change like we're having a baby.
Oh, yes.
So
All
can
right.
you walk us through? Because I mean, I'm a father, I'm not a mother, but
Yeah.
and I think all of us can get a couple of really important points from you unpacking that for us.
Sure. So the metaphor that I speak about, and this is actually something that I can say as being a mother of two. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. But the analogy that I use is that when a change is coming, and especially when you're involved in a change that's coming into the workplace or any part of your life, it is very similar to having a baby. And what I mean by that is from the minute you start trying to conceive, it becomes your whole world. It consumes you in everything that you do, everything that you speak about. Like every time you're in a conversation with somebody, you want to tell them where you're at. And it's like nothing else in this world is happening except for you having this baby. And as you go through the pregnancy, you're excited. And, every day goes for so long, and you want to tell people what you ate and how big this baby is based on the size of a fruit. But you are continuing through this, right? And you're having those roller coaster moments as you go, as you're counting down. And with this baby, as it continues, you're building and building and building to this unknown. Like you don't really know what's going to happen. Even if it's a second baby or a third baby, you don't know until you have this baby what to expect, what this baby is going to be like, how are they going to sleep, are they going to, eat well, all of these factors that are coming into it. When that baby is born, you truly look at that baby and think it is the most perfect thing you've ever seen in this world. Like I can remember looking at my children and just thinking, there is nothing more perfect. Like their eyes, their nose, their face, like this is unbelievable. And the minute you have that baby, you want to show everyone, and you want everyone to love your baby. You're like,
and how could they not? See, this is the part to me that was incredibly useful. If you're leading a change, so I'm just going to stop for a second. If you're leading a change, do you see this? Like you've conceived this change. This change is your idea. And while it's been an up and down roller coaster to get here, once you are there, you can't understand why everyone else doesn't think this isn't the most amazing thing ever. Now, listen, I have looked at the pictures of my son. And we have often talked about, the baby picture from the hospital and looked at it and said, objectively,
they're ugly.
Not a pretty photo. And I've said this to Parker, and I will apologize to him again, but it's objectively true. But you couldn't have told me that in that moment.
And that's where I see that analogy with change, right, Kevin, in that when you are buried in that, and that's the only thing you've thought about throughout the whole change process, you know how bad things could have gone. You know how good things could have gone. You had your expectations changed as you went through. It was your number one priority and nothing else was important. Meanwhile, this change that is going to impact everybody else, they haven't even been thinking about. They don't care. Like they've got so many other priorities going on. And this is the last priority. So when you're doing all the fanfare about the launch and get excited and this is going to be the best thing you've ever seen, so many of them are like, you are wasting my time. Like I've got more important things to do right now. And then what we do is we come in and we try to force people to love it. We're like, love our baby. Like this baby is beautiful. Like this change is so incredible and it's so much better than the past. Like your old world, which is pretty much referring to their baby, when you turn around and you say this new change is so much better than anything you've ever had, your old process or your old way of doing it that you've been doing it for the last 20 years, it's terrible. You are pretty much telling people that their baby is ugly, that your baby is ugly, my baby is beautiful. Love my baby. And my baby is perfect, where your baby has got so many faults. Like, how could you even want to keep that baby when you have the chance of loving my perfect, beautiful baby?
So when we take that metaphor, or at least when I take that metaphor, it immediately helps me get into being more emotionally intelligent about where other people are, because it's helping me see beyond my blind spot. Right.
Yes.
And so I think that's why it's such a powerful way to think about this process. And I'm guessing if you're here watching or listening, whenever that is, you have found yourself in that spot of leading a change and seeing it in all its glory, and others don't see grime and not glory. Right. And so recognizing that we must begin to see it through their eyes, or we've got no shot. You said something else in the book that I really loved. I won't find it quickly, I don't think, but I really love it. It's the idea, it's right here, actually, or not. It's the idea of thinking about any change, especially a larger organizational change, as being an 80-20 issue.
Yes.
Most of us have heard of the idea of the 80-20 Pareto principle kind of thing. And I think this is also a brilliant way to help us not only become more aware, but to become more emotionally intelligent about the changes, either that we're leading or that are coming at us, either way.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. One of the basic rules I say of change intelligence is that you've got to be upfront that no change is perfect. There is never, ever, ever going to be a perfect change. And the reason why there's never, ever going to be a perfect change is because what you're changing people from is embedded habits and emotional attachment that's in their mind. But we also know, as you were alluding to there, Kevin, is that when we look at making a change, we weigh it up for pros and cons. We say, what are the pros versus what are the cons of going through this change? And majority of the time, and I hope majority of the time, we make a change because 80% of it is better and it's an improvement than what we currently have. But what we tend to do when we start to roll out these changes, we tend to pretend like the 20% doesn't exist, that it's
because we're worried, in part because we're worried about how they'll lean into that stuff. But what we just need to do is be really clear that that is true. That's where acknowledgement and awareness comes from, and allows people to release their concern and actually look at the other 80%.
And what it is, Kevin, it comes down to our amygdala, right? Because when we're about to put people through change, if they are not feeling comfortable about it, their amygdala kicks in and that fight or flight kicks in, right? And that fight or flight that wants, or even the freeze, fight, flight, or freeze, it wants to protect us. So what it does to protect us is it tries to analyze what people are saying. And when somebody says to it, oh, it's perfect, it's so much better than your old way, it's like it sets us a challenge to say, really? Are you sure about that? And I can tell you, if you do not highlight that 20% that is actually better the old way, people will show you every percent of that 20%. People will come up to you and go, oh, you said it was going to be better, but what about this? The new way doesn't have this and the old way does. So you're going to be in a battle of trying to justify the change, where if up front you can say, do you know what? There are some things that are better in our current process.
Start with the 20.
Exactly.
Acknowledge
right.
the 20 first. Yes.
Yep. So when people do come to you and say, but the new way doesn't have this and the old way did, why would we possibly change? You can say, that's exactly part of the 20% that I was speaking about. There is definitely things that are better in the old way, but that's not why we moved to the new change. We moved to the new change because 80% of it is an improvement, and that's what makes the difference.
The world is not so black and white. It's shades of gray, and this way of thinking about this as the 80-20, and not ignoring or trying to hide the 20%, but opening with the 20% is a really almost magical way to acknowledge folks and acknowledge reality. There's something else that I think everyone else that you wrote, Amy, that I think everyone else that's with us needs to hear. You've written now 2 books with the words emotional intelligence in the title.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, I don't consider myself to be emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that I don't think that there is such a thing as an emotionally intelligent person in this world, because what I believe is that emotional intelligence is a skill. And it is a skill that in every situation we have a choice to make. We have a choice to respond in an emotionally intelligent way or not. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it very wrong. And I spent my whole life buried in this emotional intelligence. Like it's my most, I'm sure you can see how passionate I am about it. But I can list times where my emotional brain has jumped first and taken over my logical brain, and I have not responded initially in an emotionally intelligent way. And I think it's one of those things that we can never, ever say that we have truly mastered being 100% emotionally intelligent in every situation, because there will be times when we don't get it right. And it's those times is probably the most important time that shows your measure of emotional intelligence, because to have the ability to turn around and say, wow, I did not get that right. Like, please like I'm apologizing. My initial reaction is not what I stand for. It's not who I am. And I shouldn't have said it. Please, can I try that again? That is emotional intelligence.
That is emotional intelligence. So what you're saying then is that it's a journey to being more, to using our emotional intelligence more effectively or more wisely always. And it's not an identity to create.
That's exactly right. It's not a achieved, done and dusted. Like I would love to say to you, read both of my books and you'll be emotionally intelligent. But unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. It will give you tools. And as I said, in every situation, you have the choice to apply those tools. And sometimes you will do it really well, but do not beat yourself up on those times when you don't get it right, as long as you respond correctly when you realize that you haven't got it right. Take the opportunity to actually own it, which is a lot of what I talk about through my books. It's that ownership, to be able to truly own when you weren't emotionally intelligent and how you can be a better person.
We're going to leave that part of our conversation right there. It's a perfect place to leave it. But before we go, there are a couple other things, Amy, that I want us to talk about. And I want to talk less about all of that stuff and a little bit more about you. So I'm curious what you do for fun.
Oh, so for fun. So Kevin and I were talking a little bit about it beforehand. We're a big basketball family. So I spend a lot of time in basketball courts watching my son play basketball. We watch basketball on TV. We take holidays around, watching some basketball as well. So we spend a lot of time in that sports scene, not just basketball, but in NRL and football and NFL and all of that kind of stuff. So big sporting family, watching, because I'm not very coordinated at all. So I'm definitely not a player, just a watcher. And the other thing, which is what I'm actually doing next week as well, is my husband and I love to travel, and we love to go away in the caravan. So next week, we'll be taking one more sneaky week away in our summer holidays to spend the week in the caravan, just on the beach, nice and chill, relaxing and reading books. I love reading books. So it'll be all about the books and the food, because I love all food.
So let's talk about that. Because it's evening for you while it's morning for me. You said that right before we got on and started chatting that you were reading a book. So what are you reading these days?
Yeah, so as I said, I read a lot of books, but what I tend to do is in my downtime, which this period of the year is my downtime, December, January, I tend to take quite a bit of time off, because it's not the best time to be teaching anybody or to be running programs in organizations. So my general rule over this period is to read fiction only. So I escape from the business, escape from the PD books, and I like to just bury myself into a great fiction book. So the book I'm reading at the moment is called The Good Losers by Meg Bicknell. Bignall, I think that's how you say it, and it's actually hilarious. So it's I would suggest you probably need to be a little bit lighthearted to read this one, because it does cross the lines a few times, but it has had me laughing out loud so many times in this book, and It's about a woman whose son actually joins a rowing club, and actually the book shows group chats, and if you're a parent of any child that's ever been in a sporting club, I'm sure you would have been exposed to group chats before. And we always know that there's those specific people in a group chat that bring that different element, and Meg absolutely nails it in this book, so it's a great read.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes. We'll have a link to both of Amy's books in the show notes as well. And so, Amy, where can you point us? Where do you want to point us? So people want to learn more, get connected with you, etc. While you do that, I'll hold the book up one more time for people that are watching.
Beautiful. So the best place is to head straight to my website, which is amyjacobson.com.au. On my website, there's an insights page where you'll find links to so many articles, press releases, podcasts, all of that kind of stuff. And you'll find the links to my socials, and you'll find the links to my books as well. But my books you can find on any online platform, in any bookstore. And I know a lot of people say this, but I truly do mean it. Connect with me online. I welcome you to send me DMs. I welcome you to send me questions. As you can tell, I love a chat. So love to hear your thoughts on emotional intelligence and what you think of the books.
One more thing before we go, everybody. First of all, thank you, Amy, for being here. But one more thing before we go. It's the question I ask you all every week. Now what? What will you do now? What will you do not with buying a book, although Amy certainly hopes you do that.
Please.
But what will you do with the ideas that you heard here? What will you action from this conversation? And because until you take action on it, it won't make a difference. We said earlier, leadership isn't a job title. It's not a position. It's something that we do. Emotional intelligence is something that we do. Amy said it's a skill. So how will you start to exercise that skill? What ideas will you take from this that will start to change the way you think, the way you communicate, the way you lead? If you take action on that answer, this will have been of great value to you. So Amy, thanks again, as I said, so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me late in the evening, your time.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Kevin. And I love that you've got so much passion in this space as well.
Everybody, if you liked this episode, you're with me, which also means you're probably going to like next week's episode, then the one after that, and the one after that, which means you need to be subscribed so you don't miss them. Wherever you're watching or listening, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future episodes, because we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.